And there we go. So welcome to Safe System Assessments. We will record every session. So if you happen to miss one or you need to jump back in and look at anything, you can do so. The recordings will be available in Moodle for you, but we'll show you that a bit later.
Perfect. Thanks, Kathy. Let's get started. I think my first slide is to, remind us to hit the record button, which has been done. I also just will mention that we do show some road crash scenes, nothing graphic or overly graphic, just more of a way for us to learn and try to stop them happening in the future and maybe stop the severity of them and those sorts of things. But just if that's something that could affect you, I want you to note that. Kathy, over to you. Who are you?
Hello, I'm Kathy. I'm the training manager here at Safe System Solutions, and so I coordinate everything in the background. Now, you can contact me for just about anything that may or may not go wrong. So any technical issues after you've done the whole shutdown and restart option, which is always the first thing that you need to do. But basically, if you can't make a session, if you have any questions about the running of it or anything like that, feel free to send me an email. You would have gotten an email reminder from me yesterday, so you'll have my details. You can chat during the session, as a lot of you are doing there, saying hello to everyone. So that's the best way to ask your questions or make a comment or answer some of Ken's questions. Or you can use the Q&A function as well. I monitor both of those. You do have the ability to talk to us, and you can do that by raising your hand, and then I'll lower your hand in the little functionality on Zoom there. If you raise your hand, I can unmute you and you can speak to everyone. We still won't be able to see you on the screen though, so all good there. I think that's probably about it from me.
Yeah, so Kathy will be behind the scenes monitoring the chat and feeding me any questions, but do type stuff into the chat as we're going along. Don't wait for me to stop and ask, do you have any questions? Because time taken to type it in and then I'll probably have moved on. And just type it in as you think of it and make comments to the group, as Kathy said there. Comments to everybody are good as we're ticking along. And there's the little, everyone down button that you can click. What's this one, Kathy?
The learning management system. So we have set you up in the course in Moodle, and some people might be familiar if they were a recent attendee at university. Some of you may not be so much with it, but basically you've received an email from Safe System Solutions. Check your junk folder just in case. And what you need to do is just jump in and log into that. There is a folder basically for each module that we go through, where the copy of the slides are, any other resources that Ken might mention or we might pop in there, and as well as a quiz at the end of each one of these sessions. There's a short 10 question or so multiple choice type quiz for you to do, and that's also where there's a couple of assignments that Ken will run through. And so basically everything's housed in there. So if you can't get access to that, or if you have any troubles, send me an email.
Thanks, Kathy. Yes, very important you get into Moodle. It's the way you're going to be, uploading assignments, doing quizzes and the like. Okay, so this is me. I'm the principal engineer at Safe System Solutions. And there is a QR code to my LinkedIn because I like to continue the road safety conversation even after the course and keep in contact with you. Yes, the QR code should work perfectly well there. It's in the bottom of the slides, so at any point you can do that and connect with me and we'll keep the conversation going. And throughout this course, if you do have any questions about the content, the technical content, feel free to give me an email or a call and we can organise a one-on-one Zoom catch-up, or I can send you info, or we can talk it through. Really here to try to support you through this, build your capability capacity in Safe System and Safe System assessments. One other little thing that we've got going on here, just to keep you engaged in the slides, is our friend Wally the Wombat. Wally will appear a number of times throughout every module, and your job is to count how many times Wally appears. So you've got to keep an eye out in the slides, the Where's Wally? And if, yeah, at the end, when you do that quiz, one of the questions will be how many times did Wally appear in this module? Now that's what Wally looks like, but that's not one of the Wallies. Wally count is 0, but keep an eye out for future Wallies. And we also do give out some prizes. You'll see Kathy was there in the prize pit. How do you, oh, what do you got there, Kathy? Can't see it. Unmute yourself and tell us.
Sorry, it's my yogurt, so you're probably not going to get my yogurt once. But anyway.
It's a yogurt. Well, it does beg the question as to how on earth are we going to get people these prizes? What's the answer?
They're coming soon at the end of the course, so probably in about 3 or 4 weeks' time, once you've finished, we'll package them up and pop them in the post to you. So actually, if it's Australia Post, it might be, you know, more like 6 weeks' time. But it will come to you with your hard copy of your certificate.
Yeah, great. So you get your certificate when you successfully complete, and any prizes you picked up along the way, and it won't be a yogurt. The prizes are given out if you are the first to answer questions correctly, if you ask really great questions, volunteer to share the case studies that we do, your case studies, or every session we arrive a little bit early and we do a bit of just trivia. Could be road safety trivia, could be general knowledge trivia, so some chances to win prizes before the session even begins. Incentive to get you logged in a little bit early. Okay, and we do have a competency benchmark for this course, but we also have some set requirements. So you need to attend 4 out of the 5 live webinars. You notice there we are recording in case you miss one, but we do like with the live ones because you can answer questions and get involved, ask questions. You know, get in contact with Kathy if things are very challenging to make those 4. We need you to complete the set tasks, the quizzes, the assignments, the site visit and the report, and we need you to get an 80% mark or above for all the quizzes and the assignments and the safe system assessment. Now you've got 3 attempts at that. You get 3 goes at everything, and we offer you that one-on-one coaching support if you are struggling with it. And certainly our aim is to make sure you're at that 80% mark. So I will work with you until you understand it well enough that you can get to that 80% mark. But hopefully, if you listen to the modules, you should be able to get everything you need. Before I jump onto that, Kathy, anything that you want to cover?
Thanks, Ken. Probably just should have mentioned as well that we acknowledge the traditional owners of all the lands that we are on at the moment, and that is quite a vast part of the east coast of Australia and South Australia. And so we acknowledge the elders past and present. I think I might be getting that slightly wrong, Ken. Yeah, just in regards to today's the series, we've got people from all around Australia.
Thanks, Kathy. Yes, and we pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. Excellent. Let me just contextualize this before I jump into some content. And I do welcome at this time you to pop anything into the chat that you've got questions around the logistics, the management, the running of the sessions. But I just want to contextualize something from the start, because I often get asked this question fairly early on, and it's worth straight away doing it. Road safety audits are something that is quite well known across our industry, something that is an independent check on safety aspects of an infrastructure project. We also know that there are these things called design reviews, or that other designer redoing calculations, checking. and the like. And there's sometimes some overlap between those. Certainly there's things in road safety audits that sit outside design reviews and vice versa. Safe system assessment is sort of this thing that covers a fair bit of road safety audit stuff, some design review stuff it can cover, and there's a whole lot of stuff outside it as well. Then there's something that some of you may have heard of, safety in design. Well, that's checking, can something be built safely? Can it be managed, maintained safely, decommissioned safely? So that's, again, a separate exercise with bits of overlap in all of these. And a DDA audit, or Disability Discrimination Act audit, sometimes termed different things in different jurisdictions. Again, it's that independent set of eyes. Can it be used by all people in the community, in people in wheelchairs, vision impaired, and the like? So I just wanted to sort of put that straight out there. I'll show you a whole lot of different assessment methodologies which have aspects of safety for road users in all of them, and there's overlap between them all, but just a little bit of context. But certainly this course is all about focusing on that one there. Kathy, any questions?
No, we're all good.
Okay, I'm going to get into some content. I will get people involved shortly with some questions, and we do have a couple of little exercises. Nothing in the module is marked, so you can, be relaxed and just pop your comments in, have a guess if you need. It's only after we finish and you go into Moodle is where you actually get marked on your quiz. So let's talk about the SAFE system. And by the end of this module, what we want to do is just establish those principles and elements of the SAFE system. Some of you will be very good at that. Some of you, it's still a little bit new to you. We want to talk about kinetic energy. Kinetic energy. That's an interesting thing to jump into. We're going to look at kinetic energy thresholds for different crash types. We're going to talk about the difference between traditional approaches to road safety and the SAFE system approach. We're going to jump into some best practice around things slightly outside most of our usual operating environment, that being behavioural change initiatives and vehicle safety interventions. And we're going to talk a lot about speed and why it's so critical to the SAFE system. Okay, I'm going to be nice here. Wally count is now 1. That's it, no more help. Wally count is 1. Okay, the SAFE system is the road safety philosophy under which we operate. We operate at a federal level. Australia operates at that. New Zealand operates under this SAFE system philosophy. You'll see it pop up in all of our road safety strategies from different jurisdictions. I've got a few of them on there. You'll see commitments to different SAFE system implementation in these documents, and also quite an emergence now of SAFE system assessments being specifically called out as a wonderful tool to try to push us to greater implementation of the SAFE system philosophy. And certainly, like the Queensland road safety policy here, can't see what's there, says it very clearly. We will do SAFE system assessments on all infrastructure projects. That's very clear. Others are, the New Zealanders are very clear in theirs as well. It's a key performance indicator, how many infrastructure projects have SAFE system assessments undertaken on them. And the Victorians have a separate policy that sort of sits under their strategy. So lots of people getting on board with the idea of SAFE system assessments. And I can talk to you about different jurisdictions. We do have a variety, so I'm not going to be delving into too much detail on any particular jurisdiction, more teaching the way these SAFE system assessments happen. But yeah, so the SAFE system assessments are there, but this overarching philosophy of the SAFE system, and what is it and what does it mean? I do want to spend some time delving into that first to get us all on the same page. Some of you will be very aware of this and, be very comfortable with it. Some of it's a bit new. Some of you might have some ideas on what you think the SAFE system is, but it might be slightly different the way I present it. And some of you immediately probably think of a diagram of the safe system when you think of it. And it could be one of these many diagrams in over here. But I do want to start with this diagram here, which is actually quite an old diagram of the safe system. It's the first diagram of the safe system that was put forward in Australia and New Zealand. And in fact, Kathy, I'm going to give a prize straight off the bat here for the person that can tell me what year did the federal government, Australian federal government, adopt the safe system approach, and this diagram was the one that they were sort of using as a diagram of this system that they're going to adopt. Now, you can have a guess. You don't lose any marks if you get it wrong. You can just have a guess what year, and your chance to win a prize. Good, we're seeing some years come in. 2020, 2012, 2010. Ooh, geez, good guesses. I did see the correct answer go in there, so this is excellent. Good group, thank you. Loving the guesses. Kathy?
Actually, there's a few with the correct answer, but Hannah was first with 2004.
Okay, well done, Hannah. You are our first prize winner. Something coming in the post for you with your certificate. There you go, easy as that to win a prize, people. Okay, 2004, that's interesting. That's a while back, isn't it? So we did formally adopt that at a federal government level. We're going to commit to this philosophy of the safe system. It's the way we're going to operate for addressing road trauma. And this diagram was put up, and yeah, it's taken us a while to really start to see it now filtering in and integrating into what we do, and getting different tools associated with it. But let's look at this early diagram, and you can actually learn a few things from the process they went. I was somewhat involved in this. At the middle of this diagram, now don't worry too much if you can't read it in detail, but at the middle of this diagram, we see human tolerance to physical force. What an interesting thing to put there, right in the middle of your diagram when you're talking about the transport network, human tolerance to physical force. Interesting. And around that, we see these levers that we have to try to, operate this system. Well, we've got the vehicles that are in the system, we've got the roads and the roadsides, and we've got the speed of travel. And that was it. That was the system. That was it. The circle was drawn around it, and they said, there you go, there's the safe system. We need to understand and design for human tolerance to physical force, and we need to do that by looking at the roads and roadsides, the vehicles, the speeds, and making a system there. And somebody then sort of said, well, what about the road users? And then there was this divide in the groups. Industry sort of started dividing in terms of one camp was saying, yeah, we need alert and compliant road users who are following the rules and not making mistakes. And there was this other group that was saying, well, hang on. I mean, these are humans, they're going to make mistakes, they're going to fail, and our system should be catering for that and managing it within what we can control, being the roads and the roadsides and the vehicles and the speeds. So we're going to account for this failure. And anyway, in the end, what they did was they put this square around the circle and added this alert and compliant road users. Now, this is, I feel this was a fail. We've failed by putting that square around it. And the reason it was a failure was because back to that core element, core principle of the safe system is acknowledging that humans will make mistakes. Now, yes, we should be doing everything we can to minimize the mistakes, but we have to acknowledge that humans will fail within our system, and it's up to us to manage and design the system so that our failure does not result in death or serious injury. So by putting this there, it just gave this get out clause for all the system designers, and I call all of us system designers, and anybody involved in policy and design rules, and it's big, system designers. But if somebody makes a mistake, or somebody falls asleep at the wheel, or misses a red light, or maybe has a look at their phone while they're driving, and it results in death or serious injury, that's a failure of the system. Okay. Now, we've got to move beyond blaming the individual who has done that, fallen asleep or looked at their phone. Okay, we need to start saying, what can we alter in the system so either that doesn't happen, or when it does happen, it doesn't result in death or serious injury. And so as we evolve then from this, and I won't go into these other elements which started to then feed into, how do you make alert and compliant road users and the like, you see the diagram started to be, produced, and they altered, and they took these principles and expanded on them, and you'll probably see familiar ones in there. But I'm going to use a particular one. Oh, my PowerPoint's parked it. Kathy, I'm just going to stop that, and I'll come back in a second. Sorry, bear with me a second. Kathy, maybe you can tell people about what they're going to have to do at the end.
Thanks, Ken. Sounds like your PowerPoint wasn't working too well there. So at the end of the session, you will jump into Moodle and do a short quiz, and that's all we have for you for the end of today's session. The end of Thursday's session, there'll be a quiz as well as a little assignment for you to do, which you don't have to travel too far from. You can even do it from your desk and use Street View. Are you back, Ken?
I'm back. I maybe drew too much on the screen. It got angry at me. But we were looking at different diagrams of the SAFE system there, and I'm going to use this one. I could have picked any, but I'm going to pick this one, which has a few things on there in terms of some of the principles of the SAFE system in general. And you'll see there that it says human bodies are vulnerable. So that's still there from that original diagram. Human tolerance to physical force, human bodies are vulnerable. This one got clearly spelled out now. People make mistakes. So that's an acknowledgement. Absolutely. People make mistakes, and they're going to continue to make mistakes. We're going to try to minimize the mistakes through different ways, but they make mistakes. And it's critical that we have a shared responsibility. And people often see that shared responsibility and think about the responsibility of an individual road user, be that a cyclist, a pedestrian, a driver. But what I want you to think about really is the responsibility we have. And as I talked about there, that's responsibility that even if somebody has broken the rules, knowingly or unknowingly, not been in control of the vehicle, been intoxicated when they walked out onto the road, not crossed at the crossing, whatever it is, all right, we have to start taking responsibility for that as system designers and say, what can we do? What can we alter in this system to mean that that's not going to result in death or serious injury? And we still have these levers to play with, and the vehicles, the speeds, the road users came in there as one that we can work on. And it's not overarching or overpinning the whole system, but it's an element of the system. And then the roads and roadsides. And there's another one here, if I sort of mention some of the key principles. We have this aspiration of no death or serious injury. And we see different modeling coming out from different jurisdictions on, when could we get no death or serious injury in road transport if we adopt some strategies and investments and change the way we do things. And, it's interesting to see New South Wales has their date of 2056. Victoria says 2050. They're the two that are really high profile, publish theirs and put it out there. New Zealand 2050 as well has gone for that. But, you know, these are pretty amazing modelers coming up with this and working out scenarios and understanding it. And it's not without a lot of change to what we currently do, how we operate the whole system, but it's something that we should be thinking of in our decision making in terms of, are we actually looking to eliminate death and serious injury here, or are we just looking to make it a little bit safer? But I'll come back. Okay, let me jump out of transport for a while and jump into another industry. And I will ask you all, get you all involved in this shortly, but let me just take you to another industry completely. And I'm going to go to widget production, manufacturing. Okay, there was a time where a factory really was a fairly open system where people were brought in and, you know, they were told, oh, well, you know, you can, we'll pay you some money to clean the machines, you know, it's the kids there clean the machines, or, you know, okay, you're going to work here and your job's to do this. And they're all fairly clearly told that it's a dangerous activity. You know, you're working on machines here, you know, be careful, this is the way you should do it, don't touch this, don't go here, you know, this bit's really dangerous, and make sure you know, look here before you do this and the like. And then they're sort of patted on the back and they said, all right, here's your cloth and here's your whatever, and you've got to be safe, you know, you need to protect yourself. That's what we would refer to as a pathological safety culture. The safety culture sort of then elevates and it goes into what we call a reactive safety culture, which is where issues are identified and then addressed, okay? And they're actually meaningfully addressed. So a machine maybe rips off the arms of a few people in the cleaning process or the like, and so they say, well, let's put a guard on this machine, or let's shut it down before we clean it, or whatever it is. So we're trying to address these safety issues by looking at where they have taken lives or caused serious injury. And then the economists get on board, and the economists sort of come in and they look at the factory and they look at the amount of payouts to, you know, families of killed workers, or you know, the time that the machines are down because they're pulling body parts out of it and re-cleaning it, and all of that sort of stuff. And they start to put a dollar value to the impact of the injuries and death that's happening in the widget factory. And they say, well, factory owner person, if you were to invest £10,000, pounds back in this day, £10,000 in these series of improvements, you will get £30,000 in increased widget production and less payouts. So, you know, I've come up with this thing called a benefit cost ratio, and you can get a benefit cost ratio of 3 if you invest £10,000 in safety improvements. And that's sort of this calculating safety culture, we call it. And, you know, it's really balancing out what's a good investment. But, you know, how do we keep this productivity and, you know, just balance out the number of people we're killing and seriously injuring. And then you elevate up from that to this proactive safety culture. And what that does is it says, we demand a very high level of safety, and we will produce widgets up to that, within that envelope. Okay? So that sets the precondition for widget production, not, you know, the balancing or the like. So that's the proactive safety culture, which we're aspiring to on the road network. And I know you've already made the logical sort of met these two into the the transport and road network, and even some of the words I've used in there, mobility. What we need to do finally, though, is maintain that high level of safety, that proactive safety culture, and that's investment in certainly the machines and everything like that, but also the culture as well. So there's a continual investment in that. But where do we sit with the road system? Well, I mean, there is a lot of pathological stuff out there in the sense that we know it's an inherently unsafe system that we are operating, yet we pat people on the back, at age 17 or 18 and say, safety is your responsibility, and be safe out there. And so that's a real pathological safety culture. We certainly do reactive stuff, and there's a lot of people still only with their head in reactive and thinking that the only way to treat road safety issues is to wait for the crashes and to then address those specific spots on the network. We do calculating. Oh my gosh, do we ever? The ability to calculate a BCR on these investments is very much there, and it's done a lot, and there's a dollar value put on human life, and it's traded off against other objectives all the time. Do we do proactive stuff? Sometimes. There's real areas of hope. I think school speed zones, a great example of a proactive safety culture coming to play on the road network. And certainly if you do a calculating, economists look at school speed zones, they are a horrible investment. Basically, very quickly, the way you do that is that you look at the number of vehicles going through an area, and you look at the speed that they're going and the speed that they would be going if there's a school speed zone there. And so you work out that each vehicle maybe has an extra 2 seconds in their travel time or something like that. And you multiply that by all the vehicles that go through there per day, per year. And then you get this big figure of time, and you multiply that by the average productivity value for an Australian being about $88 an hour or something like that is what the Bureau of Transport Economics would put on it. And then you go, rightio, that's the cost, right? And what benefit do we get in terms of savings? And you look, well, how many kids have been killed and how many do we think this is going to save? And you look at it and you come out and you go, no, this is not a good investment. There's just not enough kids being killed. And there's not going to be enough kids being killed for us to warrant this under the economic frameworks that we operate. So, and it's pretty grotesque when you think about it from that perspective. But that's essentially the way we make road safety and transport decisions on the rest of the network. Kids play this special role often, don't they, in road safety, where we're willing to sacrifice a little bit there. But anyway, I just put this out there to say that we need to fundamentally shift, and we can look at, I picked this industry, but we could look at other transport industries. Rail, for example. Rail has very different attitude to safety than roads, as does aviation, shipping. In fact, you name it, everybody looks very differently at safety to the way the road transport system is looked at in terms of safety. And we're numb to the death and the serious injury and the trauma that is happening to our community because it's just what we grew up with, and it happens, and we see it all the time. We're trying to change that. And so let's, I suppose, jump from sort of the philosophical look at things and jump a little bit into some specifics. But before I do this, I'm actually going to jump back and see if Kathy's got a quiz, a little poll to pop up. Now, I remind you again, this is not one that you're being marked on, okay? You just pop these in. And the first one we've sort of answered in the slides. The second one we have not, so you get to have a guess at it. So hopefully that's popped up on your screen. If it hasn't, don't worry too much, but I'll give you a minute or two to have a crack at this.
If it hasn't popped up on your screen, there's two questions. The first one is, which of the following is not a key principle of the SAFE system? Not a key principle. Is it aim for no death or serious injury, aim for no mistakes on the road, people are vulnerable, people make mistakes, or shared responsibility? So which one of those is not a key principle of the SAFE system? And the second one, just for fun, at what speed did Usain Bolt cross the finish line in his world record 100-metre sprint? Is it 24 kilometres an hour, 34, 44, 54 or 64? So just another 30 seconds or so.
And we will have a break in about 20 minutes, or just a short break for you to fill up your water and have a stretch and the like when we get to our next little exercise.
All right, Ken, I think we've got just about everyone. So I'm just, oh, lovely. There was one more that, oh, perfect, 100%. That's the way.
Okay, well, let's share the results, have a look. Okay, so pretty much everybody on that page of aim for no mistakes on the road is not one of the key principles of the SAFE system. I mean, in some utopian world, we'd love nobody to be making any mistakes on the road, but we're just realistic in the fact that we've got humans. We want to minimize mistakes. Minimize and manage is the way I like to term it. Minimize and manage. So yeah, well done to most of you for getting that one. And Usain Bolt, okay, crossing the finish line. And the answer is actually 44 kilometres an hour. Well done to the 11 of you that jumped on the 44 as your guess. Now, maybe those 34 were doing a little calculations on the back of the envelope, but that maybe didn't account for acceleration time and the like. 44 kilometres an hour. So I'm going to stop sharing that. And why on earth am I asking about Usain Bolt in a SAFE system assessment course? Well, I want you to imagine that we park a 2015 Toyota Camry at the end of Usain Bolt's lane. And he comes running along there at 44 kilometres per hour, and then bang, he slams straight into that Toyota Camry. Now, will he survive? And the answer to that is most likely yes. He will survive that. He is the Hulk of a human. Remember that. He's really going to withstand some force. Pick any of us mere mortals up and fling us at that car at 44 kilometres per hour. We're less likely to survive. Certainly pick up grandparents or somebody quite old and fling them at the car at 44 kilometres an hour. Very unlikely to survive. And we have actually got some data on similar stuff. And this graph that you're seeing on screen now is for a passenger vehicle striking a pedestrian. And it is taken from sort of macro amount research, so lots and lots and lots of crashes, and trying to then graph those and see we've got the chance of death and the collision speed. Now, collision speed, not speed limit, not 85th percentile speed, just collision speed, speed of impact. And we see there that around the 10, 20, even 30 kilometre per hour, it's highly likely to be survivable for the pedestrian. Yet up at sort of 60, 70, 80 and beyond, it's highly likely to result in death for the pedestrian. Now, Usain Bolt comes in a little bit up there, but you know, his stature means that he's able to do that with surviving that sort of speed. I mean, you can use that analogy and you can think about running your full maximum pace and running straight into a tree, for example. And that's probably very close to your tolerance of survivability. You'll mess yourself up a bit. You are likely to recover to lead a normal, healthy life. It's how we evolved It's what our sort of structure is all about. And you know, we see lots of examples of people like this running into solid objects and surviving at pretty reasonable paces for the power of your own legs. And he recovers and goes back the next year to win the gold medal. So, you know, it's all very survivable stuff. But of course, we propel ourselves way faster than that, propel things at us way faster than that. So we need to start thinking about managing that. But we've got this information for other crash types. So let's look at side impact crashes, right angle crashes. And we've got the bullet vehicle. So the bullet vehicle is the one that does the striking, that does the damage in any crash. And so down here, we've got bullet vehicle speed, and we've got target vehicle being the one, the occupant of the target vehicle will be the one that's most likely killed. And so bullet vehicle speed, and this will be target vehicle fatality probability, driver's side there, struck passenger side on the other side. And we see a similar curve, and except for this time sort of before 30, 40, 50, highly survivable, up at your sort of 80, 90, 100, highly likely to be killed. We see this also for the head-on crash scenario. And head-on crash scenario, this is, well, each of these is a bullet vehicle and each is a target vehicle. And the closing speed, say at 70 kilometre per hour, we've got 140 kilometre per hour closing speed. Two vehicles, assume that they are the same mass, travelling at the same speed. What we actually have there are forces on the individual occupants of a 70 kilometre per hour crash, because they're going from 70 kilometres per hour and they go to zero very quickly. And it's that deceleration that's doing the damage. In fact, there's a really good Mythbusters episode on this, because people often say, well, no, you're going to take the energy of the other vehicle as well. Well, you're not. You're not. I mean, I suppose if you were standing in the middle of that and both vehicles crushed you, you would. Or if one was like a tiny little smart car and the other was like a B double, and you got pushed back, then you're taking that energy. But as they stand at, you know, same mass, same speed, head-on crash, we're seeing this as a 70 kilometre per hour crash. And of course, the Mythbusters episode does it in, you know, such wonderful Mythbusters ways of crashing cars into each other and then into brick walls, and showing the same forces running into a brick wall as it is to running into another vehicle coming the other way. So maybe, Kathy, we can share that and pop it into Moodle so people can watch Mythbusters on work time. That's always an important thing to be doing. And also, I have put into the slides, and the slides you download, PDF versions of them, hyperlinked to little snippets of information on some of these topics, where you can get a little bit more information, often a video or a little bit of, a few other bits and pieces. So feel free to click on those at some point. We've got lots of those throughout the slides. But there are these really interesting points in these curves. And they're the point at which things start to go really bad really quickly. Okay, and the speeds we're talking about are about that 30 kilometre per hour mark for pedestrians, about a 50 kilometre per hour mark for side impact right angle crashes, and about 70 kilometres per hour for head-on crashes. And these become really important sort of safe system threshold speeds. You might have heard of that term, threshold speeds. And they're really important from that management of energy to within generally tolerable levels. Now, in a safe system assessment, you are going to be required to make an assessment of predicted crashes and give them a severity rating. And you actually quantify this. So what we've done is we've tried to produce this little chart, color chart, to help you in how you might go about scoring things. Now, this comes later down the track, but we do put numbers to different severities and the like to help us along the way. We've got more crash types here, and we've got crash speeds up here. and you can start to get an idea of what sort of levels of severity we'd be expecting for different crash types under different speed of crashes. And I produced this quite a while back, and then I popped it into actually the Austroads Guide to Road Safety Part 6, which is road safety audits, because auditors should be thinking about severity like this as well. It's just so clearly in safe system assessment and quantified that it makes more sense here. The one for the audit one, we didn't put the numbers, because you don't put numbers in a road safety audit scores the way you do in a safe system assessment. We'll get to that. We'll get to all that. But it's interesting, isn't it? We're really starting to get more refined in the severity of outcome of different crashes at different speeds to try to understand how we manage that energy. And I often do say, I spent the early part of, well, a decent chunk of my career in the early days as a road safety auditor, and looking at the road network from a crash prevention perspective. And I'd be, looking at the road, and you get quite good at it. You go, well, there's a see-through effect here at this intersection, so we'll have overshoot crashes. Sight distance is blocked by that and this, and we've got adverse crossfall around here. The super elevation's off, and we've got, you're really starting to get into quite good detail. But nowadays, what I actually do is I really just look at the road environment as potential energy. Okay, so I'm now looking at that road and saying, well, I've got an intersection here, and they're going at 100 kilometers an hour, and any vehicle that enters that at 100 kilometers an hour is off the charts in terms of right angle side impact with car to car. I'm down here somewhere. I'm in the black. This is, these are energies, not tolerable. So yeah, so you got that. I'm not ignoring the see-through effect and these other things. I'm certainly trying to address that. But we're now in this, energy and energy management game. Very strange barbecue conversation when they ask me, well, what do you do for a living? I say, I'm in energy management. Oh, really? Okay, I've got solar panels on my roof. Oh, not that energy. No, let me explain it to you. I'm not the most popular person at barbecues, but anyway, right, carrying on. Okay, let's now address this diagram, which is the bane of my existence. I loathe this diagram. It pops up quite often. And what the diagram is a crash causation diagram. It says it's always been this massive crash causation studies where they've taken like 5,000 crashes and they've done root cause analysis and trying to work out, what went wrong, where was the cause, what was the failure, and inevitably in these crash causation study, they always come out with 85 to 95% of crash causation is human error. Now, this particular one was just drivers, in the Kimbler one, 2003, but let's go with road users, because other crash causation studies have done, pedestrians and cyclists, and they're always able to find that, well, in most of the cases, to find the error by the human, and the humans factors people and the like. They love it, and it's wonderful studies and great research methodologies and real in-depth stuff, and and I don't argue with any of it, and I respect the results, and I think they're wonderful. They get sometimes the vehicles malfunction, brakes have failed, or the I don't know what's happened, flat tire or something, tire blowout. Sometimes the roads been hit a massive pothole, or a tree's fallen on the car, or something like this. The road and roadsides, and sometimes there's overlap. But the thing is that what people do with this is what really annoys me. And the more we sort of put this out there, the more it reinforces that, oh my gosh, we'll address the biggest problem. I mean, we've discovered it's the biggest problem. Now we need to train these drivers, and we need to give them better skills, and we need to, look to do all of this stuff. And the thing is that we need to alter that thinking because, well, first of all, they're the hardest to change. You're really trying to change a lot of the time the nature of being human. And you get into dilemmas, is it the right thing to do for us to genetically engineer people to stop taking risks on the road? I don't know, that's well beyond my level of philosophical thinking. I'll let you ponder that one for a while. But what we want to do is say, this is a system failure, right? Our system has failed. And that way we can look to address the whole system. Say, well, driver failed or pedestrian walked out on the road, okay? Now, can we address the severity of the incident by changing the road environment, or stop the incident happening by changing the road environment, or changing the vehicles, or maybe there is some extra stuff that can be done for the people as well, the road users. Now, this is an Ostrow's diagram, and they put driver excess and driver inexperience as these entities. I just put them in there. Like, okay, these are probably areas we need to address in a completely different way, but that's a system failure as well. How on earth is somebody, driver excess, driving 230 kilometers per hour down the wrong way on the freeway? How has the vehicle not intervened to stop that? I mean, the technology is not the issue. It's our will, our community, our political will to actually, put in systems that intervene in these scenarios. How are these, people with complete inability to understand the function of the vehicle out there? And but anyway, I digress. Keep an eye out for those lollies, by the way. The other interesting thing, sort of related, is that there's this great study by CASA, the Centre for Automotive Safety Research out of the University of Adelaide. It was for Austrians, and it looked into human error in the transport system and really delved into understanding, well, how are these errors, how are these errors manifesting? And it links in there. But, we've got slips, lapses, mistakes, and unintentional violations. Before we get to that deliberate violation, which is that 230 down the wrong way on the freeway, or intentionally running red lights and these sort of behaviors, which the media will often portray as our road safety problem. But we know actually that in all fatal and serious injuries, we're talking about 30%. And it's even potentially a little bit less, but I'll go with 30% of death and serious injuries sit in those, what CASA determine as deliberate violations. And it's pretty extreme stuff. Like, mobile phone use doesn't fit into this deliberate violation under their study either. So, and I think that's just because it's such a prevalent thing out there that it's not a premeditated, I suppose, response. But there's debatable stuff in there. But anyway, but the reality is that the bulk of our road trauma, the bulk of our community being killed and seriously injured are in the, in this everyday sort of mistake making. And so we need to start designing the system for that. This is going to be hugely complex in us altering it, because people use the roads the way they live is probably the most elegant statement I've heard in the high-end recidivist, deliberate violators. And we see the really complex life challenges, and they manifest across a variety of things out there, and the use of the roads being one of them, as well as many, many other things. So I kind of think it's a bigger picture challenge with that group of the population. But the bulk of what we're doing, is really us having a system that fails. Okay, let's do a little activity. And it's just a little reinforcement activity, or a little bit of you clarifying some of what I've just said in terms of your thinking. And what it is, a little mix and match exercise. So what we've got here is a traditional approach statement And then I want you to match it with a safe system approach statement. Now, some of these could go to different spots, so don't get too caught up on it, but just think through, okay, victim blaming. It used to come from, it wasn't spelled out as victim blaming, but we would really say, well, what was, let's find the stuff up of the human and case closed. They fell asleep. Right. Case closed. They ran the red light or whatever it was. So we're victim blaming, and maybe have we gone create safe effort to create a forgiving system or maximizing safe mobility? You pick one of them. Now we'll do this with a poll, just the way we did before. So you'll see each of those traditional ones written, and then you can choose which one. Some of them could go to multiple, so don't get too hung up on it. Have a think about it, and let's also have a little break as well. So I'm going to give you a good 5 or 6 minutes to do this. So put your guesses in, have a think about it, then have a stretch, fill up your water, and we'll be back in 5 minutes from now.
We've got 100% finished, Ken.
Awesome. Let's actually maybe do this on the screen. So thank you. And I had a quick flick through, lots of good answers. They're generally people in the same area there. Oh, Kathy, we're battling on who was stopping to share that. Let's have a look here. And I keep stressing there that it's not, it could have gone to multiple. Victim blaming, more to that recognizing human error, minimizing its consequence and that shared responsibility. Emphasis on road user education and compliance, really effort now to create that forgiving system. We're not going to ignore road user education and compliance, but more effort now in that, or enhancing that effort in forgiving. Crash reduction to that enhanced focus on consequence, especially severe injury minimization. So 4 pillars action independently, 4 pillars optimized jointly as an interaction. And we're talking there about, certainly that interactivity between elements, and we'll come back to that. And mobility safety balance, maximizing safe mobility. And that's a little bit like the widget factory where we're saying safety, must be extremely high, and we will bring mobility up within that envelope rather than, this sort of mobility safety balance. And that's always one that's bugged me in my time in State Road Authority, and I've lost count of the number of times I wrote a letter back justifying us retaining a high speed limit, saying, speed limits are a balance between safety and mobility and blah, blah, blah. And you kind of go, I look back at them and I think, geez, it's 20 years ago. But that's really us saying, we've got to kill and seriously injure some of our community to get fresh bread and move stuff around. And that's what it is. And we're trying to challenge that thinking now and really push back at some of that. I picked speed limits because that specific wording that we always used to use, standard words, really highlighted that. But you can pick a whole lot of other areas of our decision making in the road design, management, and operation space. And we'll come back to it. I think Ian Cameron, the Western Australian, not the UK one, Ian Cameron came up with a nice little statement. We need a paradigm shift in road safety policy to stop the road death epidemic, and we need it now. It is unrealistic to expect that education and enforcement alone will bring the needed step change. Even road users who know and follow the rules make mistakes. A safe system creates an environment in which a simple mistake will no longer kill people, or kill or seriously injure people, we could say. Okay. Let's look at something a little probably closer to what you deal with, which is road planning and design and thinking about the infrastructure. And this example here, Melbourne Highway, has just had a project finished when this photo is taken, and you can see the project was the central barrier system in a narrow flushed median. It's a 2+1 road. We call that a 2+1, where you have 2 lanes in this direction, 1 lane in that direction, separation. And, every kilometre or so, a couple of kilometres, you just sort of swap which side of the road gets it. So you got, certain cross section, and then you just keep swapping which side has the overtaking opportunity. Now, this road, this project, to put that central barrier system in, it was pretty much the first of its kind in Victoria. This is in Victoria, and it came across a lot of challenges within the project planning, the development, the design of this. And it took an immense amount of time and real courage from some of the engineers and designers and planners in here to keep pushing at this at the time. Now, you don't know this road, or some of you might, but you don't know this project. Or maybe, yeah. I want you to tell me what some of those challenges were that they had to get past. Now, I want you to write that into the chat, and I'm going to give out some prizes just on a couple that match ones that I've put in, which aren't necessarily the biggest challenges that they faced in the planning and development design, but they were challenges that they faced. So just pop anything into the chat that you think that they might have had to navigate their way through in project development design. I'll give you a minute or two to jot a few ideas in, and we'll see what people pop in.
Ken, we had a question earlier, and I think you might cover this down the track, but do safe system assessors have to be independent to the project team?
I do cover that down the track in our final module after people have gone through the process, and we talk about it. Essentially, some jurisdictions have some requirements around that in their policies to say that at least the leader of the safe system assessment team has to be completely independent from the project. But the general practice is that safe system assessors are becoming like road safety auditors in terms of independent, but it is also being used a little bit in project development in rough ways to help, and the designer or the project manager may do their own. So there's a bit of both, but from a government policy perspective, they tend to push towards something independent.
Terrific, thank you.
And I'm seeing lots and lots of awesome things coming in here. It's like this group has tried to put in a barrier down a narrow median like this before, because we're seeing, oh geez, great stuff, as in very relevant stuff, and exactly what the project team was hitting up against. So, oh my gosh, wonderful stuff. Okay. So the maintenance of it was certainly something of big concern, and the maintenance crews were very active in voicing their disapproval of this from the process and the cost and all of those things. The dynamic deflection of the barrier, so Alex has put that in there. I'm going to give, Alex can have a prize there just because it was matching one that I was particularly fascinated in. The maintenance one was definitely one that was there, but I just happened to write the dynamic deflection one down. I'll come back to that, Alex. Good point there. So we've got the BCRs of the project, or cost benefit analysis, benefit cost analysis. Is this, are there enough people being killed and seriously injured in this stretch of road to warrant this investment? So that was certainly, there was a lot of analysis like that. The motorcyclists was certainly one there, and that's come up there from somebody. I can't quite see who it was. It's not appearing fully there. Initial CB. So Kathy will work that out, no doubt. So the motorcyclists, that can be a prize there because I jotted that one down, and I want to talk about that in the third module we've got. because there's a lot of myths and rumours and untruths going around with motorcyclists and barrier systems, but I'll address that a little bit later on in the session, in the modules. Environmental, yeah, so removal of trees, non-recoverable slopes on the side, cable trains. Oh, somebody else had motorcyclists there, so Michael can have a prize too. Reducing lanes. There was actually one lane in each direction, and it got widened to a 2+1. So that was actually what ended up happening. Another one, deflection there, Brett, stakeholder engagement. So Brett can have a prize as well. So I'm just reading through them, and I hope you're all having a look through as well. So it's pretty good. Deflection of the barrier. There's another one. Kathy, I'm gonna leave this to you to pick all the ones that have come in. Okay, looks like we've got quite a technical group here, which is good. Just checking if there was any other. Yeah, okay. Property accesses, U-turn facilities, another great one that certainly came up. Oh, and then there was quite a few others. Emergency management, how we're going to get to the other side of the road if the bush is on fire. You know, how are they going to do enforcement if this vehicle speeds past to 200 kilometers an hour and the police are on this side? What are they going to do? You know, lots of, I suppose, practical challenges. Now, what we need to do is acknowledge all of these and be really clear to say that it's important for us to work through these. But the reason I'm showing you this is to highlight the fact that if you get a road safety audit done on this job, which they did, all the auditor will do is point out issues like the ones you're talking about. That's their job, right? They say, what risks will the introduction of this present? Not what benefits and life savings is this project going to bring? But that is what a safe system assessment will do. And it will show you the huge benefit of putting that barrier in. It might talk a little bit about some of those issues. In fact, it might talk a decent amount about some of those other issues. But acknowledging this and quantifying and putting forward independent sort of support for the safety outcomes of this is a pretty powerful thing. And it's something we have been somewhat lacking in a formalized, structured way in road safety. So this is a huge advantage of safe system assessments to help us with projects like this. Now, I'm not saying we ignore all those other issues. We need to work through those. They take a lot of time and you've got to do lots of bits and pieces. But safe system assessment is very helpful. The dynamic deflection one, particularly fascinating for me, and I did have some involvement in it, was where, you know, the cross-section was fairly much set as, you know, it's a bit of widening, but you couldn't go too far and it was kind of set. And, you know, we wanted the wire road safety barrier system in, or they did, because it's the most flexible, the most forgiving. And at the time, there was no back-to-back flexible W-beam systems for those who play in the barrier space. But you know, if this vehicle was to leave the road, that the posts are going to break away and they're going to deflect into the, well, they're going to deflect a certain amount. Now, a wire rope safety barrier hit at 25 degrees, 100 kilometers an hour with a 2-ton vehicle will probably deflect into the lane a little bit, right? Not under these specific crash test protocols. Now, that was, you know, not meeting the deflection requirements, and thus was pretty much said, you can't do it. You don't put the barrier in because you're not meeting deflection requirements. And really, it was, so what do we do? Like, just leave it as a wide center line. And doesn't that strike you as odd? Like that the preference would be to have no barrier because it doesn't meet deflection requirements than have a barrier that just slightly misses the deflection requirements. So, luckily sanity prevailed, but it did take a good 9 months or something worth of, design exception reports and meetings, and, because putting a barrier down the middle of a road like this was a very uncommon thing. It's a bit more common now, and there's some good guidance coming out and lots of different things. Anyway, point being, stepping back and thinking about the overall safety benefit of some of this stuff. And innovation is always going to happen in this way. People will focus on the risks being introduced rather than the benefit we can gain from it, because that's the nature of the people doing these bits of analysis. So the safe system assessment is a wonderful tool to help us innovate, but we need to really work through those other issues to try to minimize their risk. There's a bit more of that road. And of course, it did get hit, and it continues to get hit, and there's maintenance requirements. And interestingly, the maintenance crews in this region and a couple of other regions now are really great advocates for the barrier system that they were jumping up and down to say, you can't put it in because we can't maintain it. We can't maintain the pavement here because people won't be able to get around us, and we can't run contraflow and all of these things. Well, they got together and they were empowered to alter their maintenance practices to really to work around this constraint. And they came up with good ways to manage all of this. They had some input into the design and where some breaks were. And they are now seeing the reduced trauma to their community. And yes, they're out there to fix the barrier, reasonably often, but we're really seeing the advantages of it, and they can do it all safely, and they're very happy. Interestingly, it also got hit fairly early after it was put in, and a member of the public called up and asked to speak to the engineer that put it in, or somebody that was involved in this project. And you've probably been on the other end of a phone call from the public, and you think, oh, I'm going to get shouted at here about something. But they actually just wanted to thank the team that did it, and said, I was driving along there, I've been driving that road for 25 years, and this particular time a vehicle just came straight at us, and the barrier was there, and it hadn't been there before, and they would have hit us. And just thank you. And luckily enough, that engineer that took the call was smart enough to get onto the comms and engagement team and say, you should probably talk to this guy. And they did that, and they created a little video, and we've put that video into your into Moodle for you to have it download. It's just a 2-minute video, but I think it's a wonderful video to show how we can alter the system to cater for mistakes. Somebody fell asleep. They left their lane. They would have hit the other person, but the system intervened. The system happened to be a barrier in this case, but meant that it's property damage, and they carry on. And you'll see that then, these are normal people, and a mistake was made. Certainly, we don't want them to get into the car. We didn't want that guy to get into the car when he was fatigued, but he did. And so that's safe system in action, in my opinion. Okay. Do pop your questions in as we're going, or comments. Happy to talk to different things, but I do want to briefly cover off some of the other elements of the system, rather than just the roads and roadsides and speed, which we will heavily focus on going forward, because that's pretty much what we all sort of work in. But I do want to talk about the road users and the vehicles. And the reason for that is that a full safe system assessment, a comprehensive safe system assessment, will do some analysis into the road users, into the vehicles that are being used, and can make commentary around the fleet or the different educational programs or behavioural programs that are happening in the area and the like. I mean, that the scalability of a safe system assessment is quite big. A lot of projects you don't get into that detail, but you do have the ability to do that. There's safe system assessments on mine sites, on remote communities, where you're looking holistically at, what's the fleet of vehicles that everybody's driving? What sort of, are they licensed? Are they getting education on these sort of things? And, you really can delve into that in quite a bit of detail. So I do want to cover off that a little bit. Also want to just point out a few things that you probably should know if you're working in a road transport related field. So let's start with road users, and we have these sort of ways to influence road user behaviour through education, enforcement, encouragement, and some sort of licensing system. I put there graduated licensing system, but your system for entry into the transport system. So let's just look at those briefly. And we know, and it's pretty obvious stuff, that little humans, so kids, are the best at retaining that educational information and using that. And if we can get that, safety messages in early and continuing throughout that development, we get some wonderful outcomes. And we also know that we can use them as little conduits to get information to their parents. And if you instill that, everybody in a car must be wearing a seatbelt all the time, they'll call it out in the car, and that works for portions of our community quite well. When we have young drivers, so those just starting to drive, we know there's some interesting research around that. One thing we do know is that any training that they do that involves high speed, advanced braking techniques, getting out of skids and the like, increases their chance of being killed or seriously injured. So these advanced driver training courses where they say, learn how to get out of skids, skid pan training, all of this sort of stuff. Yeah, it's probably one of the world's most comprehensively studied things in road safety, that it increases death or serious injury. And that's because of the increased confidence and, as a result, more risk-taking activities or of people who complete the course. They think they've got these skills, and they prove a little bit in terms of skill, but swamped by the increased risk-taking activity. So that's an important one to know. The time on the public road network is where we get the benefits, and just the hours driving with supervised drivers, understanding how the road network operates is where we see the benefit, and safer vehicles as well. So if you can get young people into safer vehicles, unfortunately, there's this paradox where we have the highest risk road user usually in the lowest safety feature vehicle, and the lowest risk road user being sort of their parents in the highest safety feature vehicle, which is this completely sort of the wrong way around. The other thing, interestingly, around education and behavioural change initiatives is the way we communicate road safety to individuals is very odd sometimes. But I like this TAC ad, which actually understands that issue. But we've got the driver texting there. And if we were to say to that driver, hey, if you text, you're more likely to be killed in a road crash, he'd go, no, I just do it when it's safe. And I've been doing it for a long time, and I've never been involved in a crash as a result. And just will not believe it. And to a degree, I don't blame them. And they're kind of right. Because what actually happens is that their risk of being killed or seriously injured on the road versus their risk of being killed or seriously injured on the road while texting, they're both absolutely tiny at an individual level. Yes, the one of not texting is a little bit better, but what we have to do is manage the collective risk, the collection of all of these little risks from all of the driving public, and aggregate them in and come up with this significant change in risk for our driving population associated with texting and driving. But what we will too often do in road safety is talk to an individual like they're a collective and say, don't do that because it increases your risk of being killed. And they just do not believe us. It's the same often when we change a speed limit from 100 to 80. And we try to sometimes go in and say, we're doing this for your safety. And they're like, are you kidding me? I've been driving this road for 40 years. I've never had an issue. And it's all these, yeah. And the thing is that from their perspective, it's probably true that they're at a low risk of being killed or seriously injured, a slightly higher risk, but still incredibly low, or at 80, or sorry, other way around. We're playing with extremely small numbers and tweaking them a tiny bit, and it only plays out when you aggregate them across your whole community. But if you can peg this back to something that actually to them makes a difference, like you text and your kid will text when they start driving, now we got a hook, and we've got something that'll actually change their behavior. A pretty neat little ad. There's a snippet there if you want to see the ad. There's an actual TV ad with it. But you can look at that from a whole range of perspectives in road safety, and I won't go into them in detail, but go back to that speed limit one. I mean, instead of saying we're reducing the speed limit on this road from 100 to 80 for your safety, we're doing it for the safety of wildlife. That's a far greater hook most of the time. We're doing it for, well, I don't know how this one will play out in large portions of Australia, but certainly the Europeans had wonderful benefit in meeting their EU climate change targets. So we're reducing all these roads to 80 or 70 kilometers per hour because we have less emissions. They were like, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of road safety aspects related to that decision making, but it's something that's more resonating. And yeah, anyway, I won't labour on this point. But just summarising a few things that work. Whole of a school's approach, so trying to continually educate throughout the school curriculum is important, and trying to combine education or behavioural change initiatives in terms of advertising, like with other partner activities like police, is good. Trying to support community education. So we do have a lot of motivated people in the community that they want to do stuff that improves road safety. Our job is to ensure that they're doing things we know have an evidence base to them. So yeah, I mean, we do see community groups pushing for road safety initiatives we know actually don't work or go the other way and make things worse. And so we just don't want to see that. Graduated licensing, which is really where you have restrictions in place and then ease them off as people get experience and become a lower risk driver. Targeting motivated groups, parents being one of the most motivated, and they will invest in safety, like safer vehicles for their kids and the like. And I'll talk about action programs a little bit later. What doesn't work? I think I've covered quite a few of these, but I don't think I've specifically talked about fear tactics. So the idea of shocking people into driving safely doesn't tend to work. So very graphic ads that are really quite, shock and awe style. The most affected, or the only affected groups, are very low risk in their inherent nature. The high risk, or people who are going to do things that our target audience really aren't affected by them, disassociate from that messaging. Where fear tactics can be useful in road safety and have been useful in the past is setting a platform for legislative change. So if you're going to implement, new alcohol or drink driving laws or something like that, and you can scare the public, they'll be more receptive to that. Skills-based driver training I talked about. Single one-off events that aren't coordinated with campaigns and ongoing support are not that effective, nor are driver simulators anything we've seen yet. Go-karting clubs, car racing clubs are very much in the same as the skill-based driver training space. And information only really very much, well, you can use information only, this many people have been killed falling asleep at the wheel or something like that. But it's not going to change their behavior in terms of resting and the like. What it it would be able to do is help you legislate some fatigue management techniques, because you're setting a platform for that to happen. Now, don't just believe me on telling you this sort of stuff. What we've done is we put a fact sheet into Moodle that you can download that has what I've been talking about there in behavioural change stuff, but also all the research and references behind that. So you can have a read for yourself if you're interested. Now, here's a really interesting graph which shows crashes on this side and then years of experience down here. And we see very low crash numbers, and it's actually, we've got crash rates as well. It is crash numbers in this one, but you can do it by crashes per vehicle kilometre travelled, or crashes per user, which is a more, I suppose, accurate representation. But low when it's a learner, which is having your supervising driver with you. And as soon as it's into that driving by themselves, the risk goes sort of off the charts there, and it comes down then over time. Now, this graph is used most often to show why graduated licensing schemes are so important and why we're putting lots of regulations on these. Drivers being, driving hours or number of passengers or alcohol or phone use or all these sorts of things. But the other thing you can take away from this is that skills can't be that important, can they? Because they have no skills. Well, I mean, this is the first time that they're ever really getting out there. And these ones have got at least a couple of years of skills. And these ones have got 4 years of skills, but they're still worse than the no-skill people. So there's a bit more to it than that than your skills of driving. And yeah, so when you have people coming out and saying, oh, it's all skills and we should give them advanced driver training, and if everybody could drive like Michael Schumacher, there'd be no, it's a load of crap. Anyway, digress. Encouragement's interesting and probably an underutilized thing in road safety. Our ability to encourage people to drive safely through incentivizing programs. Any economist will tell you we're underutilizing incentives in road safety. Really simple methods have been tried and seem to be quite beneficial, such as paying young drivers to drive safely, which essentially through the mechanism of the licensing, like you have no demerit points on your Ps, you get a full license for free. It usually costs you whatever, $400, $500. Seems to have some reasonable impact on behaviour. Interesting. Also, advertising and marketing of specific behaviours is important. So the general drive safely ad is useless, pretty much useless. The ad that specifically will say, take a 15-minute break every 2 hours of driving, it gives clear messages on what should be done. And trying to get people to retain this information and sort of advertising gurus will always talk about recall. And will or will it not lead to road safety action? It's very hard to tell. But we do know comedy is quite an effective recall mechanism for, biggest target audience being young males. And so there's some pretty creative ads out there in road safety. New Zealanders do it really well, and we often steal their ads and rebrand them our own. You probably know some of them. But again, we've put a handful of pretty creative, funny ads around road safety in. And we know that they get great recall. Do they get action? It's hard to tell. But we do look to try to change a culture and start people thinking about that safe system philosophy and all those principles we've been talking about. So you'll see ads out there now with talking about mistakes, moving it to other people make mistakes, slow down. Not trying to say, hey, you'll make a mistake, slow down. Doesn't resonate. Others make mistakes, so that's why we're slowing down. Talking about human tolerance to physical force, I use the Usain Bolt analogy, but we've got Graham. Graham is the only person designed to survive on our roads with the forces in crashes. And Graham's a life-size sculpture. Some of you probably know of Graham, but I really encourage you to Google Graham road safety and life-size sculpture. Kids walk around Graham, and it's part of a coordinated effort in the curriculum where they look at Graham. They have to do some stuff in their year 11 physics where they understand speed, impact forces, and in a pretty cool way, they change road environments to change speeds, to change impact forces. So Graham reverts back more to a human in a virtual Graham. There is a real physical Graham that's there as well. So yeah, pretty exciting, creative ways to start thinking in that safe system energy management philosophy, and start ingraining that thinking into people. Enforcement continues to play a role in our system. Any highway patrol police officer will tell you that it's not the, they're not the answer. They support a whole lot of parts of the system. But we do need to be strategic with our limited resources, put it in the right spots, do the right things. And we can look at specific deterrence, which is if you've been fined for something, you won't do it again, is the theory. General deterrence is if there's a chance you'll be fined for it, you don't do that activity. And they're both important. But visual presence is really effective in that general deterrence as well. And it's probably one of our biggest immediate levers in road safety, where we can, with big visual presence, we can alter road trauma. But most of the other stuff we do is big long-term changes. And we know that cameras work pretty well and help us to a degree. Point-to-point cameras are very effective in terms of taking a photo of a number plate at point A, and then maybe 10 kilometres down the road, another photo, and just distance time, working out average speed. And we know that's extremely effective and actually quite well accepted by the community, interestingly, which is good. Another interesting little, I talked about lack of incentive, just this thing that the Swedes did called Speed Lotto, and it's just fantastic. So they had point-to-point speed cameras like this. And so they were taking a photo of every number plate that went past and 10 Ks down the road or whatever it was, another photo of the number plate. And anybody that whose average speed was above the speed limit, they got fined. And anybody who was below the speed limit went into the draw to win all the money of the speeders. They called it Speed Lotto. And I thought that's incentivized and creative road safety speed management, because you can't claim revenue raising because it's going back to it sort of takes advantage of the humans gambling obsession and for a good cause. Interesting. Just a different way to think about it. It's an example of where we're not using incentivizing schemes much at all. The technology is incredible and just gets better and better, and it's amazing. I mean, old technology, alcohol interlocks now, where you have to blow into that and have zero alcohol in the system, and then off you go and drive, and it'll beep at you randomly over your journey. Then you got 5 minutes to blow into again. That was generation 2, after some people discovered were getting other people to blow into them so they could get their car home and things. Anyway, speed interlocks. Speed management. This is, I think, Ford's My Key, where you give your kid one key and it limits the speed and the stereo volume and traction control and things. You can set it whatever you want. But there's nothing stopping us nowadays to be putting speed interlocks. And I think it would be a good move. Like, the public is generally does not like high-end speeders. they're a bit apathetic towards low-end speeders, but high-end speeders certainly they don't. So there would be the ability to restrict, to monitor their speed all the time and in all the speed zones. And again, I say the technology is not the issue. I mean, this was my Vic Roads car like almost 20 years ago now, where it was telling me what the speed zone was and would beep at me if I'm going over the speed limit, driving around the network. So, you know, that's, as I say, 20 years ago. And now you can do a whole lot of stuff. There's some summary key points in there. I'm not going to go through those. You can look at them in your own time, just summarizing what we've been talking about. I'll briefly talk about the vehicle now, but as I always say, pop your questions in. I'm happy to talk to other points of interest or the like. Really exciting that safety is a sellable commodity in vehicles. It was very much thought for a long time that the only way to sell a vehicle was, you know, how fast it could go, the power, the number of cup holders and the color and shape and a few other things. But safety does seem to be a sellable commodity to portions of community, and ANCAP has certainly shown that with the star rating of vehicles. So there's some interesting stuff. But we do, I suppose, through the ANCAP system, get a real indication of how far we are from the vehicles withstanding the forces of common crash time. So here's the side impact pole crash test. To get 5 stars. So basically to get 5 stars, you have to crash the vehicle at a certain speed and the occupant has to not get high-level serious, basically acquired brain injury. So it gets pretty bad injuries, but should be recoverable. I'll give a prize for the person who can tell me what speed that crash test happens at to get 5 stars. Vehicle crashed, that into a pole. Pop it into the chat. Any guesses? So, seeing lots of 60s, 70s, 60s, 50s, 40s, 70s, 100s, 40s. Good. Lots of good guesses. You're all too high. Oh, there we go. Kathy, you're going to have to try and catch that. Somebody, the first person who popped in 30, we'll give it to you. It went up from 29 kilometers per hour to 32 kilometers per hour a year ago. I mean, yeah. So just think about that. When you're getting a 5-star vehicle and it says it's got side impact protection and side curtain airbags and things like that, what they're talking about is that at 32 kilometers per hour, side impacting into a tree or a power pole or the like, you're probably not going to get an acquired brain injury, or your occupant, or the person buying that. Yeah, I think that's a telling to show the difference in the speeds that we're traveling around the network and what the vehicles can do. But it is a test now, that's good. And there's also tests now for pedestrians hitting pedestrians. Now the vehicle has to protect the pedestrian in terms of the bonnet would have to pop up or an airbag would have to come out, which is pretty much standard off production line now. So we're getting some great advances in these features. But when do the vehicles sort of take over? And we talked about all that very important research that shows us that 90%, 95% of crash causation is human error. And so when do we get the vehicles to take over so we get rid of the humans out of their decision-making choice in this system? Well, it's a long, long, long time away. And we'll see these putting around the foreshore and, little bits and pieces. And we'll have, we've got the Teslas, which have autopilot for different bits and pieces. And they're all going to be helpful. But for your fleet to get saturated with this and for, everything to roll over and be accepted and the vehicle fleet to change and all of our legislation to be overhauled and everything like that, we're talking many, many years away, 30, 40, 50 years away before we're genuinely into that space. And there's a whole lot of complex issues to work through. And anyway, so to sit on our hands and say, well, the vehicles will eventually solve all this, I mean, we're probably right. Are we willing to have just this massive amount of trauma, death, injury, to our community while we wait for that to happen? No, I don't think so. But it'll be really good as more and more technology filters in and we see these vehicles that have some autonomous features, and they'll do really well. They'll, brake before incidents, so the energy will be less, like this one that took the leg off. Well, that Mercedes hit the brakes by itself and slowed down for a minor crash. The legs come off those dummies pretty easily. So, we're going to get wins like that quite a lot, where the vehicle has autonomous features, gives the illusion to the driver that they're in control. But if it gets really important, the vehicle just takes over it, as probably some of your vehicles are already doing.
And just a quick one, questions. Yep. Any thoughts on why manufacturers make cars that can go 250 kilometres an hour or more when our roads are limited to much less than that?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question, and one that's been plaguing the industry for just forever. And it's being able to sell vehicles. It's big, massive, multinational corporations that have done their market research and believe, that's the feature, and they're so good at lobbying politically and pushing things that, we have never been able to alter that. There's been some advances. Volvo, for example, has now said that they will never produce a vehicle that can go more than 120 miles an hour or something like that. It's still pretty damn fast, but at least they're not trying to push anything beyond that. But I fundamentally agree with it. And yeah, I don't even. Yeah, it's just business for others. But I agree. There's no need. Let's talk a bit more about speed from a slightly different perspective than that. So just a reminder, I suppose, for a lot of you here that we've got travel speed here. And say we've got something at 45 meters, maybe it's something like a pedestrian steps out from somewhere. And if you're traveling at 60 kilometers an hour, or if the vehicle is traveling at 60 kilometers an hour, it will just touch it. So we've got reaction time, braking, distance. If you go up 10 kilometers per hour to 70, it hits at 46 kilometers an hour. And not just 10 kilometers per hour more, 46 kilometers per hour more. So that's interesting sort of reminder. It's not a linear relationship there. And it also, if we actually peg that back to fatal and serious injury crashes, we see that for fatal crashes, change in speed, the change in fatal crashes is a 4th power relationship. For serious injuries, it's a 3rd power relationship. And so if you don't, if you're not a maths person, you don't do power relationships, it's basically saying that small changes in speed have large changes in high-end severity crashes. So if we can get small reductions in speed, we can see quite large reductions in fatal and serious injury crashes. And yeah, so I think that's always important. But speed is so controversial in the community, isn't it? I mean, speed limits are sort of the one part of speed which is really gets people going, doesn't it? And it's interesting to survey the community, and this was Tasmanian research that surveyed with the question of lowering the current speed limits would reduce crashes on the roads. Now, like, the worldwide evidence is unquestionable. Like, it is so clear that you reduce speed limits, you will reduce trauma, right? And in fact, I was involved in the update to the Guide to Road Safety Part 3 from Austroads, which is speed and speed management, and put in there like I can't even remember how many it was, 25 cases of roads that had had speed limit reductions for big lengths and the trauma had gone down, and roads that had speed limit increases and the trauma had gone up. And it's just so clear. And often it's the same road. So they're just dropping it down and up, and the crashes are just going with it. So we know it works. And, very occasionally there's some rare change in speed limit and it doesn't affect for one reason or another, but it's very well understood. But half the community, it just goes, no, I don't agree with that, or I believe it's false, or strongly believe it's false. So we've got a lot of work to do there. When asked the question of lowering the current speed limit reduce the severity of injury when a crash occurs, well, people are much more sort of accepting of that. So I think basic physics is somewhat understood by quite a few people. I suppose we can give maybe this 13% of males benefit of the doubt that they have equated it not to reducing speed. So they say the severity. If they say, well, you reduce the speed, but everybody drive the same speed, maybe that's their justification. But anyway, I think we've got a huge amount of work to do in the management of speed. And this one I also put into the part 3, Austroads part 3, which was to say, speed is so important that this one out of Europe basically says you can have a safe transport system with whatever vehicles you've got, whatever roads you've got, and whatever road users are using them, as long as you filter it through speed, the appropriate speed. And this, I can use this the other way as well, which is I can say to those people who say, this bloody safe system, all you want to do is reduce speed limits. Okay, well, there's a lot of that out there. But realistically, a safe system, the best example of the safe system we've got is a racetrack. We have extremely safe vehicles. We have roads that have been designed that have, one direction of travel. They don't have right angle intersections. They've got very clear areas that are for vulnerable road users, being the pits and those areas. And, they've got highly trained and sober and alert road users. And under these circumstances, very high speeds are acceptable, except for obviously where we're in the pits, and very low speeds are what is acceptable. So it's not about just reducing speeds, it's about appropriate speeds for the road environments that we have. And that really comes back to that infrastructure and or speed limits can be how we achieve those safe speeds. We know infrastructure can be very, very effective in getting speeds down if designed correctly. Explaining why speed limits are in place can be very beneficial in terms of acceptance and compliance, and protection of vulnerable road users generally well accepted. And so we've got, I feel, quite a good bit of hope in urban environments about sort of matching our travel speeds to what we think is appropriate in terms of biomechanical tolerance of injury and the like. In the high speed environments, I think there's some big challenges still to work through. Variable speed limits are good. I don't need to spend any time on that. And so again, just in your notes, some summaries of some key points around speeds. So our last couple of minutes, I just want to talk you through how we look at risk under this safe system, and especially the safe system assessment framework. And we've always, the international definition of risk is likelihood times consequence, or probability times severity, depending on where you're at, which is what is the chance bad thing will happen, and then how bad will it be? What's the magnitude of badness? So, what is the risk of recession? Well, what's the chance we go into recession, and then how bad will it be if we're in recession? That's the risk of recession. So this is across anytime we use that word risk. in the safe system assessment framework, what we've done is, well, what is the exposure to crashes? So how many people are exposed to a certain crash type at a location? Then what's the chance that that manifests in a crash? And, well, I don't want to go there. How bad will it be? So what is the severity of that crash going to be? And so what we're going to do over the next few modules is really hone into exposure, likelihood, and consequential severity of crashes. And so we see there, like, examples of altering the road environment to address exposure to a crash would be simply closing off roads, closing off this level crossing. Put a mound of dirt there and a road closed sign on the other one. Nobody's exposed to that. You can't cross that in terms of in the passenger vehicle. Or completely separating vulnerable road users from the high-speed traffic. You know, they are not exposed to that vehicle to vulnerable road user crash type because they're not there. Yes, different crash type probably of bikes to pedestrians, but that's another one. Then we've got what are the things that influence the chance of a crash? Okay, the likelihood. We know that we've got the tactiles, wide center line, sealed shoulders, maybe delineation, lighting. These are all things influencing the chance a crash will happen. Even things like traffic signals. I mean, they're influencing the chance a crash will happen. I'm doing anything for the severity of the crash. The severity is all around some key sort of variables that we have associated with speed, angle, mass, how vulnerable the occupants or those being struck are. So if we can slow vehicle speeds at conflict points, that'll reduce severity because we reduce speed, reduced energy. Or if we could redirect energy, energy is redirected and dissipated over time along a barrier system rather than an abrupt transfer of energy. We're reducing the severity of that by dissipating energy over time. And so that's where we're going to pick up next time. And we're going to really delve into that. And I've just touched there on the exposure, likelihood, and severity, but they are the key components of a safe system assessment. Kathy, anything for me to deal with?
Ken, we don't have any questions. So if anyone does have a last minute question, please do jump into the chat and jot it in now. Otherwise, I'm just showing you where in Moodle you are looking at. So Ken mentioned a number of resources in there and they are here. So there was stuff in there about what works and what doesn't work for young road users and so on. And where you're looking for, so that was the resources section. Module 1 is where the slides are, those videos that Ken mentioned, the quiz and the Mythbusters episode. And this is where I'll pop the recording of today's webinar in an hour or so. I think that's it.
Perfect. And we just ticked on to the end. So thank you. Log in a little bit early next time, chance to win a prize. We're going to get you to do a little exercise in the next session. So looking forward to having you there. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.